Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Le Canada a connu une reprise remarquable après la récession causée par la COVID-19. Quelques 830 000 Canadiennes et Canadiens de plus qu'avant la pandémie sont sur le marché du travail. Nous avons récupéré 126 % des emplois perdus au cours des premiers mois de la pandémie, par rapport à seulement 114 % aux États-Unis. Grâce à notre système pan-canadien abordable d'apprentissage et de garde d'enfants, le taux de participation des Canadiennes au marché du travail a atteint le record de 85,7 % en février. Le taux d'inflation diminue depuis 8 mois de suite et elle est tombée à 5,2 % en février. La Banque du Canada prévoit qu'elle tombera à seulement 2,6 % d'ici la fin de l'année. Avec ces solides facteurs économiques en toile de fond, le budget de 2023 arrive à un moment important pour le Canada. À court terme, il faut composer avec le ralentissement de l'économie mondiale, des taux d'intérêt élevés partout dans le monde et une inflation encore trop forte. In the months and years to come, we must seize the remarkable opportunities for Canada that are presented by two fundamental shifts in the global economy: the race to build the clean economies of the 21st century, and our allies' accelerating efforts to friendshore their economies by building their critical supply chains through democracies like our own. Our budget is a direct response to these essential challenges, and it will deliver new, targeted, temporary inflation relief for those who need it most, a stronger universal public health care system, including dental care, for millions of Canadians, significant investments to build Canada's clean economy and create good middle-class careers, and a responsible fiscal plan that will see Canada maintain the lowest deficit and the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7. We have the remarkable good fortune to live in the greatest country in the world. Canada is filled with people who can do big things, and I have never been more optimistic about the future of our country than I am today. At a challenging time in a challenging world, there is no better place to be than Canada. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
On a des questions, une question de suivi. We'll start on this side of the room.
Hi there, Dylan Robertson from the Canadian Press. Minister, you're planning to find $7 billion in government savings without affecting services to Canadians or transfers to provinces. So where else are these savings going to come from, and does that include layoffs or hiring freezes?
Thanks for the question, Dylan. No, it does not. Those savings will come from government operations. And I think that those savings are imminently attainable. I also think that it's the right thing to do because we needed in this budget to find a balance between continuing to invest in Canadians, to invest in affordability for Canadians who are feeling the pinch of inflation right now, to invest in health care, including a historic expansion of health care to include dental care, to invest in building the clean economy of the future and the jobs that go with it. And at the same time, it's really important for us to continue to be a fiscally responsible government, to maintain that AAA credit rating. And so finding that balance, I think, quite appropriately involves the government taking a look at how we do things ourselves and doing it a little more efficiently so that we can afford to continue to invest in Canadians.
And Minister, dental care was never part of your electoral platform, and now the startup costs and the ongoing spending are both higher than you had originally planned for. Why prioritize this massive spend on dental care instead of other priorities that you actually ran on?
I have to say, Dylan, I am really, really proud to be an MP in a governing party, to be a minister in a government that is expanding dental care to cover all Canadians. I remember as a kid growing up, you could tell whose parents didn't have a lot of money by the state of their smile. And I think that's a horrible thing. And so actually, I think it's really right and appropriate for dental care to, like all the other health care Canadians get, to be something that you get when you need it, not based on the size of your bank account.
Thanks, Dylan. Next question.
Les hauts fonctionnaires ce matin nous disaient que c'était un budget de choix. Malgré tout, vous avez plusieurs dizaines de milliards de dollars en nouvelles dépenses. Alors, peut-on vraiment parler de choix dans ce budget?
Absolument.
Pourquoi?
On a fait 3 grands choix. Investissement dans l'abordabilité pour les Canadiens, parce qu'ils en ont besoin aujourd'hui. Deuxièmement, les investissements dans la santé, incluant les soins dentaires. Et troisièmement, dans la création de l'économie propre du XXIe siècle. Ce sont les 3 grands piliers. Et oui, c'est un choix de vraiment avoir un budget axé sur ces 3 priorités.
Vous parlez de transition verte. Au Canada, on le fait en grande partie en réaction au plan vert des États-Unis qui a été adopté en août dernier. Est-ce qu'on n'aurait pas eu avantage à agir plus tôt? Est-ce qu'il n'est pas, au fond, un peu trop tard?
Avec beaucoup de respect, je dois vous dire que je ne suis pas d'accord avec vous. C'est le Canada qui a commencé ces actions très, très fort pour bâtir l'économie propre. C'est le Canada qui a mis un prix sur la pollution. Une grande décision et une des décisions les plus importantes de notre gouvernement. Et le Canada a commencé avec cette décision de faire des grands investissements chaque année, avec chaque budget, dans la transition verte, dans la création d'une économie propre du XXIe siècle. Évidemment, on a ajouté des mesures dans ce budget et c'est la bonne chose à faire. Mais si je peux me permettre, ce sont des autres pays qui ont décidé de suivre l'exemple du Canada.
Merci beaucoup. Next question.
Yeah, Mr. Ryan Templeton, National Post. In the fall economic statement, you were predicting 5 years out a $4.5 billion surplus. You are now predicting a $14 billion deficit. And overall, you're adding about $50 billion in new debt in this budget over the next 5 years. I'm wondering why you made that choice to add so much to the national debt right now. What were the economic circumstances that drove that decision?
So first of all, Ryan, and I apologize for being a little bit pedantic, but Canada's budget is not based on my predictions or the predictions of the economists in the Department of Finance. A very good and sound practice that Canadian governments have had since the early 90s is to base the economic forecasts that form the baseline scenario of Canadian budgets on the average of the forecasts of private sector economists. And, when I look sometimes at the budgets of other countries, and I see the way there's a real debate about the economic baseline and the way governments can put their thumb on the scale, I think it's really important to be clear with Canadians. And look, I know everyone in this room is a specialist, but I think it's important to be clear with Canadians that that baseline forecast is entirely objective. And the information on the economists whose forecasts we use to build the baseline is in the budget. So it's not my prediction. It's not Michael Sabia's prediction. These are the averages of the predictions of private sector economists. So that's point one. Point two, why did we choose basically the budget that we have today? And I would just say, we had three things in mind. The first one was, what do we need to do for Canadians today? And I am ready to take on anyone in this room or outside this room who wants to challenge the idea that we needed to make a targeted and temporary investment in affordability for Canadians. It's something we needed to do. There are vulnerable people in Canada who need that support, and so that support is there. Number two area of focus in the budget, healthcare and expanding it to dental care. Again, I am ready to take on anyone who says the federal government shouldn't have done that. Yes, it's a lot of money. It is a significant investment. And every single healthcare worker I have spoken to, every single nurse, every single doctor, every single personal support worker has said to me, you needed to do that. I believe that our universal public healthcare system is at the heart of what it means to be Canadian. The federal government has stepped up to provide more support. It is now in the jurisdiction of the provinces and the territories to deliver an improved healthcare system. We have done our part, and again, yes, it was expensive, and it will be expensive, but it is 100% worth it. And, I challenge anyone to try to make the case publicly that that was the wrong thing to do. Third area of investment, building the clean economy of the 21st century. Again, here, I really believe we are at a turning point. President Biden was here in Ottawa on Friday. He said this is an inflection point of the kind that you encounter every 5 or 6 generations. I think he's right. We see the Americans are there, investing in building. The Europeans are there too. And Canada has to be there as well. And again, here, I feel that a failure to put forward a comprehensive, effective, and adequately financed plan to build the clean economy of the 21st century would mean consigning Canada to deindustrialization. And I sure am not going to be a member of the government that makes that choice. So we really thought about what are the pressing, urgent priorities of this moment facing Canadians today, and our view was those were the 3 priorities. At the same time, we know that fiscal responsibility matters. We know that maintaining Canada's AAA credit rating matters. We know that not adding fuel to the flames of inflation matters. And so we have found a path to invest in these 3 priorities while absolutely maintaining a fiscally responsible budget. And I'm going to give you guys a proof point. Take a look at the deficits of every other G7 country, and you will see that Canada's budget deficit in a year when our economy is slowing and a year when we are making these important, significant investments is the lowest in the G7. That, to me, is a very powerful proof point that we have managed to find a really challenging balance between 3 essential investments and fiscal responsibility.
On your dental care plan, there's been considerable confusion today. We've heard different things from finance officials and PMO officials. It's clear that you are bringing in the plan this year. Is your intent to also expand the eligibility all the way out to what's considered in the confidence and supply agreement to everyone, or is this year's eligibility only going to be certain ages and groups?
Okay, so the dental plan is a really big deal. It's a huge, and I believe necessary, and I think something we should, necessary expansion of healthcare, and I think it's something we should be really, really proud of. It does cost a lot of money. We have seen the costs of that plan fully accounted for in the budget this year and in the fiscal framework. Because it's complicated, we are going to be rolling it out step by step by step. We've already covered kids under 12, and we're going to be rolling it out to the other groups in a phased approach for people earning $90,000 and less. One thing I want to emphasize here is delivering an entirely new aspect of the Canadian healthcare system is not a cakewalk. It's challenging, it's complicated, and so that's why we're taking a step-by-step approach. But I am really confident that this is the right thing to do for Canadians.
Thanks, Ryan. Next question.
Hi, David Youngren from Reuters. A couple of quick questions. How can you say the fiscal anchor is working if the debt to GDP ratio is going to go up next year?
Hi, David. Nice to see you. So, look, let me start by just pointing to what is happening with the deficit. The deficit this year will be lower than the deficit last year. It's going to be 1.4% of GDP in 23-24. It was 1.5 in 22-23. It has also declined in absolute numbers from $43 billion to $40 billion. And over the fiscal framework, the deficit will be an average of 1%, falling to below 0.5%. That is fiscally responsible. And, I mean, you, of all the people in this room, is someone who is very conscious of the international context. I think it's really important to be aware of that. And I really, we will share the data with people here, but I urge everyone, take a look at the deficits of other G7 countries. Canada's going to have the lowest deficit this year in the G7, lower than Germany and the US, the two other AAA G7 countries. We're also on track to have a lower deficit than Australia and the Netherlands, two other AAA countries that are not in the G7. So I see that as fiscal responsibility. And when it comes to debt to GDP, I would point out that over the framework, we do see a steady downward track of debt to GDP. That's important to us. Final thing I'll say is, if you look at the upside scenario in the budget, where we looked at what happens under different economic cases, you'll see that if we were to not experience the economic slowdown, which private sector economists are forecasting, you would have a debt to GDP ratio that is steady.
And secondly, I've been around a while, as have others in this room, and I recall governments of different stripes, Liberal and Conservative, both promising to wring billions of dollars of money out of increased efficiencies of government operations, and the result being not much. Why do you think that you are going to be able to find these extra billions, whereas many have not managed to do so in the past?
I could offer a facetious answer to that, or a smart alecky answer to that, but I won't. Let me just say that we have been really thoughtful about where we think these efficiencies can be found. I would say broadly, part of what we're looking to do is, in all sorts of areas, during COVID, we had to provide a lot more support. And part of the process that Canada has been going through is those temporary COVID measures, which were necessary, which got Canada through a historic crisis. We have turned those measures off because the pandemic is over. And that is part of the process that the operations of government need to go through as well.
Thanks, David. question.
Boris Proulx, Le Devoir. Respectueusement, vous n'avez pas été très clair en répondant à la question de mon collègue du National Post concernant les phases du programme de soins dentaires. Question très simple. Est-ce qu'un adulte à faible revenu va être couvert par une assurance dentaire dès cette année et quelles sont ces phases?
Je veux laisser fournir les soins dentaires aux Canadiens et Canadiennes est une chose importante. C'est aussi une chose compliquée. Et on doit aussi être consciente des besoins et des systèmes divers dans tout le Canada, incluant le Québec, qui a un autre système et une autre approche. Nous savons cela. Pour cette raison, je peux aujourd'hui vous assurer qu'on a un plan pour l'expansion des soins dentaires, que tous les Canadiens moins nantis auront la possibilité d'utiliser ce système. En ce qui concerne les détails, je vais laisser à mon collègue Jean-Yves Duclos de préciser les détails parce que c'est vraiment compliqué.
Comme un adulte qui voudrait des soins dentaires en 2023 n'aurait pas eu sa réponse aujourd'hui, mais je vais enchaîner. Pourquoi il n'y a pas de montant particulier pour le logement très significatif dans votre budget 2023?
3 réponses. Premièrement, on a dépensé beaucoup dans le budget de 2022 pour le logement. Et ce n'était pas seulement les dépenses ponctuelles, ce n'était pas seulement les dépenses pour 2022, c'était un programme avec des dépenses annuelles. Alors, on est en train de mettre en œuvre le programme qui a été lancé en 2022. C'est la première réponse. Deuxièmement, il y a des autres mesures qui étaient annoncées en 2022 qui sont mises en œuvre maintenant du début de l'année, comme la taxe aux logements qui ne sont pas occupés, comme la compte sans impôt pour les premiers acheteurs de maisons. Alors, le grand plan pour le logement était lancé 2022 et aujourd'hui, on est en train de livrer la marchandise. En ce qui concerne le logement, je vais finir avec en disant cela. Le plus grand problème, c'est la construction des logements. On a une population en croissance. C'est une bonne chose pour notre société, c'est une très bonne chose pour notre économie. Mais pour avoir une population en croissance, on doit construire plus de logements. On est prêt à travailler avec les provinces et avec les municipalités pour créer une approche au Canada qui permettra la construction de plus de logements. Parce que c'est la question principale. La question du logement, ce n'est pas principalement une question du manque de l'argent fédéral. Il y a du capital privé pour la construction des maisons. La question du logement principal, c'est qu'on doit trouver une façon de construire du plus.
Merci beaucoup, Boris. Next question.
Hi, Minister. Tessie Sanchi, Hill Times Health. I'd like to ask about mental health funding. In election 2021, your party promised the creation of a mental health transfer. This budget does not make any reference to a transfer. Is your government actually planning on going ahead with developing a transfer?
So when it comes to mental health, we announced in February and we lay out in this budget the details of the funding of a very significant increase in federal funding for healthcare. And that is being now negotiated as part of bilateral agreements with the provinces. We very much hope and anticipate that mental health will be included in those conversations because mental health is part of human health. So that's my chief answer. There really is not a lack of federal funding in the healthcare space. Major investments in the Canada Health Transfer, major investments in bilateral healthcare funding, major investments, as we've been discussing, in providing dental care. And we see mental health care is very much a part of healthcare and are counting on the provinces and territories to provide it.
So is it safe to say that the mental health component in the bilateral health agreements replaces the promise of a mental health transfer?
What I would say is I think we need to be taking a holistic view of health. And when we are providing significant funding, really significant funding, $198 billion over 10 years from the federal government for healthcare, we very much expect mental health to be part of that conversation.
Thank you. Next question.
Raymond Filion de TVA. Bonjour, Mme Freeland. J'aimerais vous entendre au sujet des risques de récession. Les économistes du secteur privé, et vous les mentionnez dans votre budget, parlent d'un risque de récession modéré. Oui. Vous avez deux scénarios. Qu'en est-il? Est-ce que vous, en tant que ministre, vous attendez une récession ou pas en 2020?
Je n'ai pas une boule de cristal pour faire des prognoses pour l'économie canadienne. Vous avez très bien résumé la moyenne des prédictions des économistes du secteur privé. Je vais, pour ma présentation au cabinet, j'ai cité ces prédictions. Oui, c'est pour le premier trimestre une diminution de 0,3%, pour le deuxième trimestre de 0,8% et du troisième trimestre de 0,3%. Et au quatrième trimestre, qu'on aura encore une croissance de 1,1%. C'est la moyenne des économistes du secteur privé. Et on a utilisé cela pour notre scénario de base. Je ne vais pas ajouter des prédictions personnelles, mais je peux dire trois choses. Premièrement, il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes dans le monde aujourd'hui. C'est la réalité. On a eu une hausse des taux d'intérêt synchronisés du part des banques centrales très vite et on ne sait pas encore précisément que seront les conséquences. Alors, il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes dans l'économie mondiale. Première chose. Deuxième chose, dans ce monde avec beaucoup d'incertitudes, le Canada est très bien positionné. Nous sommes bien positionnés parce que on a pris une approche responsable du côté fiscal, parce que notre marché du travail est très fort et parce que notre système financier est solide, robuste, nos banques ont beaucoup de capital. Alors, ce n'est pas mon rôle, ce ne serait pas correct pour moi de faire des prédictions personnelles, mais je peux assurer les Canadiens que dans un monde avec beaucoup d'incertitudes, le Canada est très bien positionné.
Au niveau des dépenses militaires, plusieurs s'étonneront de voir qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup d'argent, seulement 86 millions au cours des 5 prochaines années. Comment expliquer ce faible niveau d'investissement compte tenu de tout ce qui se passe actuellement avec l'OTAN, avec la guerre en Ukraine, pour nommer cela?
On a fait des annonces significatives quand le président était ici avec le Premier ministre. Vous savez très bien qu'on est en train d'acheter les avions F-35 à 88 pour un prix de 20 milliards de dollars. Et l'année passée, on a annoncé un investissement de presque 39 milliards de dollars dans NORAD. Alors, on fait des grands investissements. Et je veux ajouter une autre chose en ce qui concerne la sécurité internationale. C'est que quand il y a une crise, quand le monde a besoin du Canada, le Canada est là. Et aujourd'hui, la crise de sécurité internationale, le plus importante, c'est l'invasion illégale de la Russie, de la part de Russie de l'Ukraine. Le Canada est là pour l'Ukraine. Vous devez seulement demander aux Ukrainiens, ils le savent. Ursula von der Leyen a dit la même chose. Dans le budget, on a annoncé encore 2,4 milliards de dollars pour aide financière à l'Ukraine. Le Canada est une chef du file parmi les pays de G7 au niveau per capita en ce qui concerne l'aide directe à l'Ukraine. Alors, on est vraiment là, on fait son juste part et on peut être fier de ça.
Merci beaucoup. We have time for one more question. Unfortunately, no follow-up, but one question.
Thanks, Minister. David Reevely from The Logic. This budget makes a fairly compelling case for tax credits as a way of encouraging the kind of clean industrial development that your government wants. But it seems to be at odds with what your practice has been with things like the Strategic Innovation Fund, the great big promise to Volkswagen, which I guess is an expenditure of its own. Can you explain how these philosophies fit together in your mind?
Sure. And I'm glad we make a fairly compelling case. I'm going to try by the end of the day to have you guys all thinking it's a compelling case, or even like a very compelling case. First thing I would say, and I'm sure you've done this, it's page 73 and 74, 74 and 75 in there in the budget. We've laid out across 2 pages how all of our clean economy programs work together. And the basic principle that you'll see there is we see this as being a pyramid. At the base of the pyramid is the price on pollution, which, as I said earlier in this press conference, we were there before anyone even dreamed of the IRA, and this is important. So base of the pyramid, price on pollution, regulatory framework, supported by contracts for difference. The next sort of level, the next floor in the pyramid is the tax incentives. And we have 5 principal tax incentives, which we have been laying out over the past 12 months, and we sort of have almost completed the process of detailing them in this budget. Then, next floor of the pyramid is concessional financing. And that's going to be provided through the Canada Infrastructure Bank and the Canada Growth Fund, which is stood up fully in this budget. And then at the top of the pyramid is, what you might call more bespoke support for particular projects of the kind that you described. So I see all 4 of these layers as working together. And I think we have a really strong, robust plan that is going to do 2 big things. The first is pull in a lot of private capital to these investments, both Canadian private capital and capital from around the world. And second, through pulling in all this private capital is going to create a lot of great middle-class jobs in our country.
Thank you very much. Sorry, this concludes his press conference. Ceci conclut la conférence de presse. We need to go to the House.
Sorry
You're
about
half an
that.
hour late. Part of the reason why you're out of time, right?